Hi, my name is Catherine Hunsucker, and today I'll be going over the history of Tibetan sky burials. Before I get started, though, I do want to say I will be going over not only the resources of that region, but also the history of Tibet itself, because it kind of does pertain to why sky burials are practiced like they are today. So, introduction. The region of China, because it now belongs to China, formerly known as Tibet, was located mainly on the Tibetan Plateau. Formerly, Tibet did share a border with India, which is important with pertaining to the kind of the exchange of Buddhism from India to Tibet, as well as that border is one of the main reasons why China invaded Tibet. So, Tibet's been ruled by Dalai Lama since the 13th century, meaning that it has a merged government of both government officials and religious officials, and it is headed by a religious official. China took over Tibet most recently in 1951 after about 200 years of independence. Before that, they belonged to another Chinese empire, and then before that, they belonged to the Mongol Empire. So they've been an independent country for quite a while, and this takeover is considered modern history. So these maps, I just really wanted to show that border in between Tibet and India, and it's quite a significant border. And then here I just wanted to show the sizable Tibetan plateau. It is the largest plateau in the world. And what a plateau is really, it's just an elevated plains. So, going into the religion of Tibet, Buddhism was introduced by way of King Songtsen Gampo in the 17th century. Forgive me, the 7th century. He introduced it to court, and it slowly took over the nation. Buddhism kind of merged with the previous practices that the people took part in. There's no true documentation of what they practiced before Buddhism. Unfortunately, there's very little documentation in Tibet, or the history of Tibet. So, but we can kind of see hints of it with how they practice Buddhism, because it does differ with how other nations practice it. And since the 13th century, Dalai Lamas have been the head of government, and underneath him was a council called Kashang. And the council just kind of took care of things while the Dalai Lama, if he was being reincarnated, they took care of the government while he reached the age of 18. So, going into the resource part of why sky burials are the way they are, the Tibetan Plateau, it averages around a little bit underneath 15,000 feet above sea level, and that means it's pretty cold. The ground is mostly permafrost, and so with that, it is very, very hard to dig. It is frozen solid ground most of the year, and so interment is a very rare occurrence, if any, because I did not see any evidence of it in my research. So, another thing is that most of Tibet is above tree level. And what that means is that wood is a very rare resource, and that's why we don't see cremation as much in Tibet as we do with the sky burial. And there are other types of burials, if we want to get into it, such as water and fire. Now, like I said, cremation is very rare. They mostly save that for significant people who are of great importance. They will build a pyre for them. Now, water burial, not as much practice in today because it does have some concerning things due to it can cause quite a bit of pollution. Because with water burials, what they do is that they will portion out the body much like they do with sky burials and put it into a body of water, most likely a river, in hopes that it will feed the fish. Sky burials are the #1 practice of any kind of disposition in Tibet. So, what the sky burial is, it is a type of burial, And the first documented sky burial was in the 14th century. Now, it is pretty much agreed upon that sky burials were practiced much longer than just the 14th century. But, like with the previous religions practiced, there is little to no documentation before the 14th century about sky burials. So, with proof, we can say they begin with the 14th century. Now, the values with sky burials, the values that they're really trying to hit with sky burials is, one, is reincarnation, which is a very big value in Buddhist religion. And another kind of part of that is the fact they believe in non-permanence. And what that means is that they believe that they shouldn't try to slow down the decomposition of the body, because they know that nothing in life is permanent, and that to slow down the body would be kind of an affront to nature. And so, another thing, and this is really individualistic to Tibetan Buddhists, is that they believe in serving the community and treating all living creatures equally and with respect. So, the sky burial does begin immediately after death. The body is placed within a sitting position, and the local lama, which is a spiritual leader, will pray over the remains, and they will pray from a spiritual text called the Bardo Thodol. I might be butchering that. And the family does remain with the remains during those 3 days. They do remain within the home. However, they are encouraged by the Lama to not kind of create any kind of upset. They don't really encourage any kind of loud mourning. And they also extremely discourage any touching of the deceased, because, and with all of that, the Lama really wants to make sure that the spirit that was in that vessel is now able to make an easy transition into their next life without any interruptions. So, once the 3 days of prayer have ended, the remains are then transported to a burial site. And really, a burial site is there's a number of holy places in Tibet that can be used as burial sites, but it's really any even higher elevated area where they can where vultures would be the main creature to be present during the burial, because they are viewed in relation to religiously, they're viewed much higher because they're able to transport the spirit to the sky above than, let's say, wild dogs, who can also be seen at these burials. So, incense is burned to attract the vultures, while the rogue Yapa, I know I'm butchering that as well, prepares the deceased. And how he prepares the deceased is that he portions out the remains into segments, and he also slightly peels away the flesh from the bone to make it easier for the vultures to tear away. And he lays that out among the burial site, which we kind of see here. And from there, the vultures will eat all the flesh, and the rogue Yopa will come back in and grind up the bones, mix them with something palatable, such I read that barley flour was something that they used, and then spread those out so then the vultures would also eat the bones. Because the main goal here is to leave nothing of the spirit's previous vessel behind. They want it completely gone. And it's also viewed if, say, the vessels was not completely devoured, some of the people would take that as a sign the spirit that had previously inhabited that vessel may have been unclean or not truly holy, and maybe they didn't have an easy transition into the next life. Maybe some of their spirit remains. So it's very important that all of the deceased is gone. And then once it is completely gone, that is when the ceremony is completed, and that's when it's done. So, is sky burial still practiced today? Very much so. Like I said previously, there are not that many resources available in Tibet that would make any kind of other burial possible. And really nothing has changed with sky burials since its documentation. Now, one thing though is China has started to allow tourism starting in the 1950s, and unfortunately many lamas have seen Chinese tourists dishonoring the dead or mocking them while they're performing the ceremony. And another thing is China is trying to make more regulations and restrictions to sky burials. And they're doing this in a way to help vultures, because there has been some cases where vultures are deceased right after a sky burial is performed. So they're just trying to protect wildlife, which can be viewed as good, but also we need to make sure, or it needs to be done in a way that it doesn't continue to push the boundaries that they've already pushed. So, and then another thing I did want to kind of go over is the effect of sky burials. The effect of sky burials in Western society is not an easy thing to see, and the connection that I made was green burials, because sky burials are an ancient form of a green burial, if we want to put it that way. Because ceremonial green burials, they've been practiced all around the world, and even sky burials. They've been practiced not only in India and Tibet, but they've also been practiced in Australia by the indigenous people, and the Native Americans had a way of sky burials. Now, all of them differ in how they're practiced, but they are a type of sky burial. And so that was very interesting to see. And I just kind of wanted to make that connection to the new green burials, though they are different types, and sky burials are not something that we see, but we are seeing, an acceptance and an encouragement of nature to take charge of the decomposition of the remains. And instead of religious views, we're starting to see more scientific views in the way of green burials. Because with Tibetan sky burials, they're practicing it because it's religious based, but green burials are scientific based. So we're starting to see that transition too, and I thought that was interesting. And I just wanted to say, green burials are not only part of our past, but they are part of our future. And I'm not saying green burials are in any way, shape, or form going to completely take over the traditional funeral service. And in fact, it won't even outtake cremation, as we see an uptick in cremation. But I do think we are going to see more of it, and I do think it is important to know the history and where people are coming from with that want of nature to be the one in charge. And so, with that, I will be off. And here are my resources. They're very fun resources to read. And thank you so much. I hope everyone has a wonderful day.